Recording in progress.
All right, I'll call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item on the agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment in the room? No? Okay. Any comment on Zoom? It's just Ray, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so I'll move on to the next agenda item, which is further discussion regarding the treasurer position. So, we discussed this at the last meeting and decided that we wanted to pursue this further and do more research. So I know individual members have done some research on their own that we'll talk about. One of the other things we talked about was bringing in the director of finance, talk to her about if we were to move the responsibilities of the treasurer into her office, how she would envision that working. And so Amanda Moore is joining us tonight, so you're welcome to come up here, Mandy, or if you want to sit at the table, wherever you're more comfortable. So Mandy is relatively new to the role in Suffield, but she comes to us from Windsor Locks, so she has a lot of experience as director of finance there. And I know I spoke to Mandy before the last meeting, and I shared that with you at the last meeting, but now we've got Mandy in person. So, maybe you could just talk about your experience in Windsor Locks to start with, and I know you said that the treasurer duties fell within your office, and so maybe that would be a good place to start. I mean, if you have any opening remarks you want to give, that's fine too. But
no, that's fine. So okay. In Windsor Locks, I equated the treasurer position to almost like a week mayor position. So it was a chartered position. It was a $200 stipend a year. They signed bonding documents when we went out to bonding. And then some of our controls internally were if we were going to move more than $2 million in one day, the treasurer signed off on that individual cash transaction. He was a signer on all bank accounts for the town, obviously, but when the treasurer took office, they deputized and deputy treasurer, and usually that was the finance director, because per charter, they oversee all receipts and disbursements of funds, and so the majority of that comes through the finance office, so that the treasurer isn't having to sign all the vouchers that go through or approve all POs or things like that in the approval process. It gets assigned because it says, or their assignee. So in the finance office, we had, like everywhere else, dual controls, so the director and the assistant director would be able to enter or release each other's wires, transfers, and then the Board of Ed also had the same level of authority. They had dual control over there, and then as a backup, if somebody was out, the Board of Ed could release something for the town could release something for the Board of Ed if necessary. The internal process was just that there had to be attached documentation as to why you were sending that amount, which is what happens now when Casey asked me to release payments for payroll or pension or OPEB or transfers or whatever it is that we're transferring money for. So very similar. I'd say the downside to having the finance director do that is typically your finance director isn't really strong in investments, and so if you're looking for a treasurer that's going to earn a lot in investments and focus on the investing side of it, we focused previously more on, okay, it's first thing in the morning, I'm going to log in, look at all the cash accounts, which ones I have to move money for, do we have a batch going out, do we have payroll today, do we have things like that. So it was more cash management than actual investing. And then we had investments with 2 different firms mostly CDs, some state debt, things like that, some other municipal bonds. And basically they would call up and say, you've got something maturing, let's get this into your ladder. And that was the extent of my personal investing historically. I understand that Board of Finance here is very strong in investment, and they were already a little over my head the other night when they were talking about stuff. So, I mean, having that backup there could be beneficial, but I'd say that's the downside, is that the finance director is gonna be worried more about just cash availability more so than your earnings and investments. And then the one downside of having an elected treasurer that I see is that elected officials, if there were ever a problem, are much harder to remove or inhibit from doing anything until that you can take action. So an employee, if there's concern of theft or whatever, you can immediately revoke their access, suspend them for an investigation, something like that, remove the ability to do something. After I went to Windsor Locks, there had been a previous tax collector who had stolen some money there. And they said they had a really big problem because they knew exactly that it was happening. They involved the police, but there was nothing they could do until they could take proper action to actually remove the individual because they're elected. So that is something that's challenging with an elected official, so.
Anybody have any questions for me?
Do you, Mandy, I do. Michael Mean, so I just want to make sure that I'm clear. You don't see an issue with the treasurer position becoming appointed rather than elected?
I don't.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, you talk about the investments and, you know, I mean, admittedly, it's not an area, you know, you've had experience in or whatever, but, so I appreciate that, and nobody can be an expert in everything, so that, I mean, nobody would expect you to be, but in our case, I mean, that's become very important. I mean, I think last year we were upwards of $2 million in interest income, and some of that is, you know, partly because interest rates were up, but it's also because we got very aggressive
Yeah.
in cash management and investing the money. So, I mean, if that, you know, if we were to fold the treasurer position into your office, I mean, how would you envision making sure that we're maximizing our potential with investing the cash?
So I think part of it is working closely with the investment advisors. I know out of the two firms that we used in Windsor Locks, one of them was very hands-off. They almost exclusively worked with municipalities and understood that municipalities weren't aggressively investing. Typically, they're doing something that's going to be safe, right? That they're not going to be hands-on. So the other firm did a lot of market updates and education and things like that, and I found that very helpful. I learned a lot through those regular updates, and they did both webinars that were to multiple people and then one-on-one times that were just like a quarterly update of what was going on, what we had in positions and where it was going and what was doing well, what wasn't, so that we could look at what we wanted to invest. If there was something coming up, to invest some more depending on what our cash needs were. He was very attentive to big projects in town and what we needed for cash flow. So I think building that partnership, building that relationship with the investment staff is key.
Yeah, I mean, I know, you know, like Casey has the, you know, when we're in July, when we're collecting tax payments, you know, it's the day that the cash comes in, it's getting invested so that we're not missing a day of interest and things like that. So somehow that's, you know, if we were to move in this direction, that's got to be done out of your office.
Yeah.
And I mean, having been there, I know that it's not like there's a lot of free time to focus on that stuff. I mean, there's two of you full-time now.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think you have the capacity to take on those responsibilities?
I think that the cash management here is a lot different than the cash management in Windsor Locks because there's a lot more moving based on the centralization of cash. So it was more about covering different banks and different batches over there. they had centralized that, did a ZBA overnight, like, did auto draws basically, so you didn't have to worry about covering payroll or AP batches, because that automatically pulled. But it was in knowing enough that you had in your main account that was getting pulled from was the key. So I think it'll be a little learning curve, but I think, you know, knowing to set aside that time first thing in the morning to check, knowing the schedule of, you know, Board of Ed payroll versus town payroll and AP batches. I think with that, with our assistant going from a part-time position to a full-time, we do have more capacity in the office. It's hard to tell, but I think it is a possibility of being able to manage it, yeah.
Okay, because, I mean, there's a real cost to not,
There's
making
a
that
lost
time,
cost
right?
of not doing well with it, I agree.
So Elizabeth Kaplan, wonder if you can educate us all again on the reporting structure, how it currently stands in Suffield, and how you think that would change if this rolled into your office.
So Casey works in the finance office, but obviously as an elected official, she doesn't report to any of us. But I would say we're constantly in contact of, you know, what she's doing investment-wise, with the dual controls with the bank. Right now, if she's sending money from one bank to another or outside or anything, there's a release. So she would input it and she would send me an email that says this is pending, can you please release, and there's always a backup attached. And then once I go in and release it, I send her back confirmation that I've released it, so we know when everything is done. The one thing that I didn't think of previously is I know that Casey manages all the debt payments right now. A lot of municipalities use a bank to do that for them so that they don't have a risk missing a debt payment. So for those of you that don't know, it's a really big deal if you miss a debt payment. With our continuing disclosure, we're required to disclose if we ever don't meet any of our obligations. So you would have to post a notice on EMA, which is forget the acronym, it's basically the reporting structure that all government agencies use for their financial statements and their debt records and stuff like that. So if you were to miss a payment, you have to not only post a notice that you missed the payment, but chances are if you miss a payment, then you're gonna miss posting that you missed that payment as well, and that's another thing that you have to post, that you missed posting that you missed a payment. It sounds insane, but so a lot of banks offer, and I'd have to look into it. If Casey weren't here, it'd be absolutely something that I would pursue, to look at our main bank to see if they offer. Usually they have something where you fund, it's typically 6 months at a time. They want you to fund what your debt payments are for the next 6 months, and then you fund it in July and in January when you get all your cash payments. And then they pay your debt and they certify that it's gonna be to the debt holder on time and things like that. So I would say that's something critical that in a transition period can be rocky. So that would be something I would look at. So things like that are going out, like a debt payment, something like that, I would release things internally. If she's just moving things between accounts at TD or wherever, then that doesn't need a release because it's not leaving our ownerships. It's all within town. So if to cover like WPCA or something like that. And then, sorry, you asked.
sorry, just a second. Chris, are we recording?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, sorry.
Nope.
Okay.
And so what else did you want to know about the reporting structure?
Just wanted to make sure I understood how you guys connect.
Yeah.
And if you think that would change if that moved from elected to.
So if it were appointed, it'd be very similar. She would still be part of our office and still communicate with us probably in the same ways. And then she would probably feed through our office up through the first selectman, I would assume, so. Yeah.
So it's my understanding that Casey likely puts in more hours than a typical treasurer with the stipend that she has would be putting in.
I see her a lot.
Yeah.
She puts in a lot of hours.
Yeah, so if this became an appointed position, would you expect that even to increase even to a greater amount of hours? Do you think what the treasurer is putting in now in terms of hours is certainly more than our previous elected officials have done, but do you think more is needed, required?
Do I think more is needed? I don't think so. I think she does a good job of managing things. It's not like she has things that are kind of falling by the wayside that I'm aware of. So I think the time that she puts in now is a reasonable estimate. I don't know what the seasonality of, I obviously in July she's doing a lot more moving of cash and things like that, but I'm not sure how much else as a gauge. I would think it's fairly reasonable, yes.
I mean, it would seem to me if we were to move down that path and it moved into your office, that it would serve us well if we needed it for, the Board of Finance to provide, another body, whether that was part-time or whatever, to make sure that, all this stuff got done. I mean, there's the control aspect, but it's, to your point, you can't miss a debt payment. There's all the cash management, dealing with the banks. I mean, there's dozens of bank accounts that, Casey does all that, that work with the banks. There's the investments. I mean, there's pension and OPEB, and the capital expenditure account. So there's a lot there. I think, but that is not necessarily the kind of thing that we would build into the charter. That would be up to, you and the First Selectman and the Board of Finance to work that out if that's the path we went down.
That was really my question, this is Kathy Harrington, was I was going to ask, did you think that it would be more worthwhile to have either a full or part-time person, especially someone that could handle the investment piece, like you spoke about, maybe someone who has some expertise in that. And like you said, Eric, it's not like we would be that detailed in any type of charter recommendation, but I do feel we could pass along the information, so in case it were to pass, if the residents voted in favor of it, this information would be passed along to the administration.
I mean, I definitely wouldn't advocate for eliminating that additional body altogether, especially when you have the way our controls are set up right now. You need some depth in that for if there's emergencies, if somebody's out of town, out of country, things like that. So having that ability to have a backup and have somebody else that can handle some things, that's pretty important. So.
And then just one last thing, do you see any issues at all, and potentially there are none, but just to ask, between having a finance director and assistant, maybe another person in there, having like the quality controls and the dual authorization within like a hierarchy of like, supervisor and people who report beneath them? Do you see any issues with that?
I don't think so. I think as long as you have one person that's entering it and one person that's reviewing the backup before they release it. I understand what you're saying, like as having a supervisor say you have to release this or whatever, but I think that's more the culture of the environment that you have in your office. When I started, I told them, you always should question. You should never just assume because I tell you something, because I could make a mistake or, plenty of things happen. So encouraging that, I'm not sure this is right question, or why are we doing this again? Like that's more of a culture, I think.
Excellent, thanks.
Ray, I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah, no, I agree, John. I just wanted to thank Liz and Kathy for stealing my questions and comments.
You're welcome.
No, I'm good. Between Liz and Kathy, they covered exactly what I wanted to ask.
Jeremy?
I'm all set. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I don't have any more questions for Mandy, but I'd like to stay on the topic.
Okay, sure. Anybody else? Okay. I mean, you're welcome to stay for the discussion, but don't feel obligated. So.
Thanks, Mandy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, you want to take it, Mike?
Yeah, we've been talking about this particular position for the last several meetings. And I think each and every time that I kind of keep thinking about it, pluses and minuses, what have you, I keep coming back to the same thought process and concerns about this particular position. And, I think, generally speaking, I think the conversations that this commission has had is really kind of evolving around looking more deeply, obviously, into an appointed position as opposed to an elected position. So, I'll first say that, when we talk to the tax collector, when we talk to the town clerk, it was very evident to me that they are a strong piece of the fabric of Suffield, and that people really rely on, or really enjoy having those folks in our town and being able to talk with them. Not so much with the treasurer position. I think, having Mandy's discussion, I think, was very helpful. Seeing no issue with folding that position into the director of finance. She's got the time, apparently, to oversee that position. So I think from that standpoint, that really works well. Obviously, a huge concern about what she said about the town of Windsor and having an issue with their treasurer and all the extra things that needed to be done in order to kind of extricate that person from that position, which you would not have if that person was appointed. I think there's a huge financial risk to the town because of that. And, the amount of time, the additional amount of time to be able to stop a bad actor from doing that certainly seems to be longer for an elected position than it does for an appointed position. And I think I got this thought from, I think, either Kathy or Liz's question, but when I think about my career and all the roles and responsibilities that I've had, there's always someone that understands what I do, how I do it, and if I get hit by a bus or I'm out for an extended period of time, there's folks that can at least know what I'm supposed to do and how I'm supposed to do it. I think that's a little bit more of a challenge with a one-person office. Not to say that, some of that information isn't already with the director of finance, but, it's, the tax collector has people that work with her in that role, so they understand what's going on a day-to-day basis. Same thing with the town clerk, right? So I do have a concern with that with regards to the treasurer's office. I think that becomes much less of a concern if that is folded into the director of finance, because then the director of finance has the responsibility of making certain that she understands what that position is supposed to do on a daily basis, and if, God forbid, anything were to happen to our treasurer, could jump in and take care of that, which may or may not be available right now. So for all those reasons, and sorry for being so long-winded, but I'd like to make a motion that this commission recommends that this position, the treasurer's position, be changed to appointed as opposed to elected. And I think the verbiage around it and responsibilities and the details can be made up separately, but I think, once we cross that hurdle, I think we can move a little bit more smoothly through. Because if we're not going to make that recommendation to the board, then I think a lot of this other stuff is kind of moot.
Agreed. there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, thanks, Ray. All right, so, did you get the motion, Chris?
Yes.
Okay.
He's recommending that the commission moves the treasurer position from an elected to an appointed.
Okay, so I'll open it up for discussion. Jeremy?
No, just clarifying in terms of, this is just basically saying at this point, we're going to be moving forward with recommending it be an appointed rather than an elected position, again, just to kind of, to be, put it in the vernacular, just to make sure we're not wasting our time doing all this research if we can't agree that this is going to be the direction we want to proceed, right? Is I got so many, okay.
Okay. Elizabeth?
Oh, so many thoughts. Generally, I think that is the right call. I feel like we have a system that's not broken. It's worked for us for forever. But could we be doing it better? And I think what we're learning is we could possibly be doing it better, or providing us a little safety net if we do find somebody who is elected that is not performing the job in a great way. My only hesitation along the way, and I feel like that's resolving in my head, is we make the recommendation, and then how that job description and how it plays out and what the framework looks like within the Department of Finance, we really have no say in. So we're just throwing out the recommendation and hoping it looks like what we're assuming in our heads is going to be a better situation than the one that we're in. And I'm going to have to, I guess, become a trusting person and hope that it does go down the path that we're envisioning to, to go from something that's not broken to a different system, puts a lot of trust in everybody else to make sure it goes the way that we're intending it to go. So I'm wrapping my head around that. I think I'm there.
Yeah. And, I mean, I would agree with everything that you said, Mike. I mean, I didn't necessarily start out thinking that we would be moving in this direction, but I think as we've gone through the process, which I think is why the process is designed the way it is, to do the homework and to hear from people and to do research and think about what we've been tasked with, I mean, I think I've come to the conclusion that it is the right path to move down. That there's a lot of risk by not doing it. I mean, to Elizabeth's point, it's not broken now. That we're very fortunate that we have a part-time treasurer who puts in the hours and has very high integrity and makes it work, but there's no guarantee that we're going to have that forever, that Casey won't be there forever. So I think it's too important not to move forward with that change. So.
And if I could respond to Liz's comments, I think it is important to make sure that it gets done right, to your point. But I think that there are a number of folks that are going to be heavily involved in making sure that, it's as good as we can get it, including the Director of Finance, including the Board of Selectmen, and others. So, I feel pretty comfortable that, with all that body of knowledge and expertise, that they can come up with, a good, solid way to move this forward.
Yeah. I mean, along those lines, I mean, I've been on a number of these charter revision commissions, and I would say that despite the best laid plans to design something that should be functioning a way that you imagined it, it doesn't always get executed that way by the whoever the powers that be are, whether it's the First Selectman, the Board of Finance doesn't fund something the way you think it should be funded, so there's always that risk. But I think our job is to lay it out as clearly as we can as to how we think it should work, and then it's up to the elected officials at the time to implement it and evolve it over time. So to work with the Director of Finance to make it work.
So,
Ray?
Ray Donald, I have a quick question. So this particular recommendation is accepted by the Board
Oh,
of
it's
Selectmen.
on my desk.
And who eventually articulates that proposal to the voters of the town of Suffield?
Well, ultimately, we do, so,
Okay, that was my question.
yeah, so we would have to come up with a language in consultation with the town attorney
Right.
to modify the language in the existing charter, so Kathy.
So, this is Kathy Harrington. So Eric had asked me to reach out to Derek, and I did, and Derek just got back to me tonight and said that he will get some language to the group by the end of the week or early next week, so we can have it for the next meeting. A proposed language, I said, just we had talked about some broad language that would pull the treasurer within the finance department, what changes could be made to the charter, and also, would there be a problem with them still serving as ex officio on town commission, so he would look at all of that. What I recall is at the last charter revision, the selectwoman and the town, when they did the presentation at the town meeting, they would give the presentation. But certainly if any charter revision commission members are in attendance and can give backup and explanations, so that if the town has questions as to why we're proposing certain things, like that would also be helpful in terms of the messaging to the residents, for sure.
Any other comments, Ray?
No, I guess we need a vote.
Kathy, you have any comments?
Oh, I don't have any comments, thank
Okay.
you.
All right, no other comments? All right, so we have a motion on the floor to recommend that the treasurer position be moved to an appointed position rather than elected. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, I think that was 5-0. Okay. So the next steps would be, I guess, for Derek to suggest that language to us, which we can review it.
Yes, I think Jeremy has some language here.
Yeah,
You
if-
might wanna talk about?
Yeah, if you all want to consider it. So I did go ahead and do some research prior to the meeting. I apologize as I looked up the town of Windsor. The charter information is from the town of Windsor, Connecticut. However, the job description came from the town of Windsor, Mass. So I did not realize there was a town of Windsor, Mass. Until today. So anyway, no, I highlighted the sections that mention the town treasurer. They do have an appointed treasurer. So I noted those in before. It looks like it's appointed by the council. It does look like there's a term limit, as well as there's also some mention of, I know we've talked about like bonds and that kind of thing. So there's a section dedicated to that maybe we could look at including. And I also, since this was an issue, got the section for removal of a council of appointees and the process that they use for that in the event they have a bad actor. So I don't know if that's something we want to kind of just look over now and summarize, or if we want to kind of take it back on our own and then maybe discuss during our next meeting as we review the language provided by the town attorney.
Yeah, I think it's probably better to take it, review it.
Yeah,
at the next
Yep.
compare
meeting.
the two together.
Yeah.
Yep.
Justin,
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing this, Jeremy.
Yeah, no problem. And then the full charter, I did bring a copy just in case we did want to discuss it, in case there was any nuance or details associated with it that maybe were not captured in the excerpts here. But it is publicly available online, so if you have any
Yeah.
questions or details, feel free to research into
So
that.
that's the charter of the town of Windsor?
Correct,
Okay.
Windsor, Connecticut, that's the full charter.
Yeah.
These are just excerpts.
How many pages is that? Why is that so small?
I don't know.
You double-sided?
Is it ours?
No, it says it's 18 pages. Now, this is just the charter, not the codes. So there is a section of,
Yeah.
there is a section of codes that's also equal to, additionally long. So that was not included, because again, I didn't think we could change the code. I thought we could only focus on the charter.
Okay,
But that's also available online.
right, okay. Thank you for doing that, Jeremy.
Yeah, no worries.
So you'll hand that out?
Yeah, I already handed out, I gave
Oh,
it to
okay.
some to the folks here. And then, and I gave a digital copy to Ray.
Okay. So just, to help Derek with the language, if we think about the current treasurer, I believe the treasurer is elected to a term, so the treasurer would not be up for election in 2025, but would be up in 2027. So the current treasurer has been elected to that 4-year term that expires at the election in 2027. I mean, given that this will not be on the ballot likely until sometime in 2025, is there any objection to us proceeding down a path that the language would indicate that the treasurer serves out the existing term, and that's when we make the transition?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's fine.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, so that's what we'll direct Derek to,
I'll add that to, I'll send that to
yeah,
Derek.
okay.
Mhm.
All right, anything else we should talk about related to the treasurer?
I don't have anything.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. Thank you, Mandy.
Excuse me, thanks, Mandy.
I think you're getting more to do. I think you're gonna get more to do.
Never know.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda was for us to review the provisions of the Permanent Building Commission. So if you recall, Kevin Goff, who's the chairman of the Permanent Building Commission, presented to us at an earlier meeting with some concerns about the language in the charter that exists today, and I see Kevin is on Zoom with us now. So, I mean, I'll try to summarize what I think I heard, and I'll certainly let Kevin articulate his position. I mean, when I read the charter and when I think about how the PBC has existed in the past or functioned in the past, it's, you know, the Permanent Building Commission is responsible for buildings. So, you know, building buildings, renovating buildings, you know, major capital projects and investments in that infrastructure. And I think, you know, my understanding is that, you know, there's been graying of the lines maybe to some extent, where they've been asked to get into more of the maintenance, you know, opining on maintenance of facilities, and, you know, maybe some thoughts that, you know, they're responsible for that as opposed to just the, you know, the construction of buildings, whether it be, you know, ground up, a renovation, major alteration, or something like that. So I think, if I heard correctly, that's where the conflict has come from. Kevin, is that a fair summary of?
Yeah,
where we
I
are?
think I can clarify it just a little bit more.
Sure.
I think the building commission functions best when it reacts to a request from the people who are in charge of the building. So for instance, if the superintendent, the principal, or the school's facilities manager says, we need something, and that something is at least a capital improvement and probably a threshold of a dollar amount, that's when we should get involved. Now, I think we have a group of people that can serve in a consultation too, to reach an agreement on when we get involved. For instance, if there's a sidewalk problem, or let's take a good example, over at the high school or at Spalding School right now, there is a need for masonry work, and I'll just leave it at masonry work, whole scope of masonry work. Now, I would look at that and say that's a regular maintenance item, and that could be done, you know, a little bit each year. Does the building committee need to get involved in, you know, regrouting of a masonry wall? I don't think so. Could we answer questions about what do we do when we see this problem? Absolutely. I don't think the building commission should be responsible to evaluate every aspect of every building, to then tell somebody what needs to be done, hope that it gets funded, and that it actually gets done. I think there needs to be a full-time person looking at this stuff all the time, rather than relying on volunteers to do that level of work. So I think the charter is being interpreted currently to say, you guys are in charge, give us an annual report, tell us what needs to be done. But if I, as a member of that committee, make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, it's really up to them then to turn around, agree to the project, fund the project, and then hand it back to us to do the work. I just think that that whole first step should be done by the people who take care of the building on a daily basis.
And Kevin, Ray Dalrymple, how are you?
Good, Ray?
Is it, because I'm looking in front of me the chapter 91 and the couple pages you had provided regarding the PVC. I'd like to get something that you and possibly the other members of the Permanent Building Commission prepare, something in writing that articulates why the language in the charter presently is not what should be working the best and most efficiently. Could you prepare something in writing for us? I'm just,
You could do that, yes.
it's kind of hard to act on, the five of us kind of jotting down some notes and going to the Board of Selectmen with something. But I'd like for you guys to prepare it just so we're not misinterpreting anything that you would like for those changes to be effective.
Ray, and to be fair, I'm not advocating in a strong way to change anything. What I really like to do is, if the Permanent Building Commission went on a bus trip and the worst thing happened, when the new group comes in, who is in charge of taking care of the buildings? Is it the Permanent Building Commission, or is it the paid staff?
Right.
And I think that's the crux of the interpretation right now. And I'd just like to see if your fresh eyes would look at this and interpret that intention into what's written now.
This is Kathy Harrington, just so, Eric, I'm not sure if you remember, but Kevin Goff did send me his suggested changes to the charter. And I don't know if we can circulate them to the group to look at and to review before the next meeting, because I feel like the suggested changes, I had a couple suggestions to the suggested changes to make them a little more clear. They're fairly simple and straightforward and seem to do exactly what Kevin is asking, which is to have them be more of an advisory and consultative role to the Public Works Director. And that might be something that I think Ray is looking to see, like, what exactly are you looking to change? And it doesn't look like there's much, it's just more putting them in kind of a secondary role,
Okay.
so to speak.
Right, but it's something I'd like to see in writing.
Yeah, well, it sounds like we
Kathy
have
does
that.
have that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
So, Kevin, is this a situation where we have differing interpretations of the existing charter, or the charter is in need of change?
We have been functioning with this language in the charter for as long as I've been on the committee, which this committee was formed when, I hate to call it the new high school, but the Sheldon Street building was built. This is when our committee was formed.
That's 25 years, right?
It started as a building committee and became a permanent building commission. So the charter has been in place for at least that long. We have never functioned in the most strict interpretation of the way the charter is being interpreted now. And for instance, the biggest difference is we used to have up to 4 people working in the Public Works Department. We had a road person, we had a buildings person, and we had an engineer. And we just had a whole bunch of people who were taking care of the day-to-day things. And then when a problem came to us, it was really already scoped out. It was really already presented. There was a lot of research done by whether it was the school's facilities people or it was the public works director. There was a lot of thought already put into it, much of that with our input. I guess I'm concerned that the building commission doesn't have the same resources to pull all of that information together, to find out where the problem is, what the solution is, who's gonna do it, chase down a price, so that we can then send it off for approvals. If the permanent building commission is gonna do that, it's gonna require even more volunteer hours. And then quite frankly, you know, worst case scenario, what happens when something big goes wrong? Do you fire the commission? You know, I hate to say it that way, but there's a lot of truth to that circumstances. You get a lot more, I'm gonna call it leverage on a paid employee to do the right thing than you do on a group of volunteers. We happen to have a very good group of volunteers who will put in the time right now, but we're not talking about any particular person or group. We're talking about the charter that says this is how we run the town.
So it sounds like you're feeling like the commission is getting bogged down in kind of like the day-to-day, the things that are generally, or you're, at least in the commission's opinion, are maintenance items, right? General upkeep, maintenance, things that should be delegated to just general property management, right? Is that a fair summation?
Right, so if you look towards the end of the charter, and I don't have it in front of me, I apologize, but
That's
towards
okay, I
the
don't
end,
either, so.
there is a statement that says on an annual basis in July, we will present a report on the status of each building and a recommendation going forward. We've been working for 4 months on a 980-page architectural review, and we've still got at least another month to go before we complete a review of the review. If we're gonna do that on our own, we just don't have the resources to do that,
Yeah.
you know?
Kevin, yeah, I have it in front of me. The Permanent Building Commission shall annually honor before the first day of July and at such other times the town shall prescribe, submit a written report to the Board of Selectmen of the progress of the public building program and accounting of the expenditures made in furtherance of the building program and define plans concerning future building needs, and such report to be included in the annual town report.
Right. So that sounds to me more than a volunteer job.
Yeah, that sounds like a heck of a project.
Right.
Ms. Elizabeth Kaplan, I'm looking over Kathy's shoulder at the changes that you sent to recommend and then her amendments on top of that, and that looks like something that I think we can review before our next meeting. It seems like some fairly simple changes. Get the
Right,
point across of,
Right.
And just one other comment, Kevin, I'm wondering what you're doing in Jerry Seinfeld's apartment.
I'm waiting for Kramer.
I've never seen that background before. That's pretty good. You gotta like a guy with a sense of humor. That's great.
I'm glad you recognized it.
Oh, yeah.
You need one, Kevin.
At least it's not a kind of group.
Okay, so we have changes that Kevin's recommended, so we're gonna circulate that, and we'll add this to the agenda at the next meeting, where hopefully we'll also have language regarding the treasurer position. What's that?
We have homework.
We do.
yeah.
So it seems to be like we're getting close to the end here, I think.
So one comment, and I appreciate that, Kevin, I think that's great, and I think it sounds to me as though, you know, by the charter, the Permanent Building Commission acts at the direction of the first selectman. And I understand everything that, you know, all the nuances and other things and so on and so forth. And I think it's great to look at the additional language and certainly Kathy's additions to that language. I also like to get the first selectman's take on that, so that changed language as well, just so we can kind of understand both sides of the discussion.
Okay,
So our next meeting is what, the first, is that right?
first is
Is
our,
that
yeah,
next week?
so we have 3 meetings and a public hearing that we penciled in the dates. We may not need all those meetings, but the next date we have on the calendar is October 1st, so that's next
So-
week, right?
I'm off tomorrow, so I can circulate the suggested changes that Kevin gave me. I can also include in a different color font, like the couple extra little edits that I made, so that the whole group can have that. And then if you want, I can include Colin on that email and ask him if he wants to join our meeting, or if he wanted to submit comments to say he has none, if
I'd
you would
invite
like
him
me
to
to
it.
do that.
Yeah, I'd
Invite him, okay.
share the information with him and invite him to join the meeting.
Okay. That way we kind of get it all in one shot.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay, all right. And other than that, I don't believe we have anything else for our agenda for the next meeting, right? Anybody have anything else? No?
I
Okay,
have my homework.
all right. So I'll move on to public comment. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks,
You're welcome,
Kevin.
I'll be happy to answer any questions any of you have.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Do we need to do
Thanks,
anything
Kevin.
on the timeline to complete work, or is that?
I think we just did,
Okay.
yeah.
So October 1st, I'm sorry, so October 1st,
October 1st,
Tuesday.
October 14th, October 22nd. We've scheduled a public hearing on October 30th.
thank you.
And all of them are back at the police station,
Okay,
just so
Okay.
you guys know.
all right.
I'm sorry, all of them here?
Everyone,
At
no,
the
back at
police
the police
station.
station.
Thank you.
Okay, starting with the October 1st?
Yep.
Yes, all
Okay.
Good to know,
right.
Thank
Did you
you.
get that, Ray?
because you know I would come here. It's the first time we were here, I went there.
It's all right, I'll remind you all.
Thank you.
Ray?
Yeah, I'm good with all those dates.
Okay, but we're moving back to the police station.
Okay.
Okay. All right, is there any public comment?
Yes.
Mrs. Irwin?
Thank you, Minister. Suzanne Irwin, 58 Marburn Drive. I had, I think, 3 comments. The agenda doesn't include Amanda Moore being a speaker here. And I noted, I think 4 or 5 meetings. I went back on my phone and looked, so I might not be right, but it looked like July 11th, 18th, 25th, and 18th, maybe even one more. The people you were interviewing or guests were listed on the agenda. I think one of those may have been canceled, but nonetheless, it was on the agenda. And so I was surprised that she wasn't on the agenda. There were people that might have come to the meeting if they had known that Mandy was going to be interviewed or be speaking. Another thing not on the agenda was the vote that you took. There's nothing here mentioning a vote. On 818, the agenda said possible vote was listed. The third comment I had was a comment one of the commission members made, that to paraphrase it, people like the tax collector and the town clerk to be a part of the fabric of Suffield, not so much the treasurer. That sounds like an opinion that can't be backed up with anything factual. But I would think if we check the voting records to see who votes for treasurer, tax collector, and town clerk, people turn out and they do vote, that they don't leave it blank. I think that even though the treasurer isn't out in the public eye as much as the clerk and the tax collector, that the treasurer is every bit as much a part of the fabric of Suffield. I think that's all my comments. Thank you.
I'd like to respond to Ms. Irwin. So
I don't,
perhaps you
most
misunderstood.
most town meetings, they say that they won't
Yes.
respond,
So perhaps you misunderstood my comment. The
comment about the fabric of the town of Suffield was from the town clerk and from the tax collector. That did not come from the treasurer. So that was the reason for my comment. It wasn't an opinion, it was a statement from what they had mentioned to us.
Okay. Is there any other public comment in the room? No? No public comment on Zoom?
Motion to adjourn? No.
Just, I did receive an email from Tom Frenay with an article regarding different forms of government, so I will forward that to everybody and we'll make sure that it gets included in the minutes. It was an article in the Connecticut Mirror, so I'll make sure that gets distributed. So, and I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Yes?
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you.
Sorry, I wasn't clear if you